Thank you for joining the Free Time Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Robert Gaines. Today we have a double episode, and we'll begin with our first guest, Rachel Strivelli, who's a growth coach, intuitive, and author. She's been featured on Thrive Global, Tiny Buddha, Fox News Carolina, and Positively Positive. And stay tuned for our second guest, also author, Luv Lubker. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to talk a little bit about your book and what influenced you to write the book, but I want to start with the technicals first. So did you sit down and write this longhand? Was it bits and pieces, notes? How did it initially come together structurally?
Great question. And I love getting into the technicals because for some of us to get started, we need to have that framework of hearing how other people have done it. I did a mix of how I wrote it, but I did actually write a lot of it by hand. And my book is on the shorter side, so it's 68 pages total. I have another book that is unpublished would probably be 125 pages-ish. That was all typed out. And so for this book, it's spiritual nonfiction, and I would meditate with my journal and then write. And so that for me felt that it allowed me to stay in that trance state, if you will. And while it is more tedious to write by hand and then type it, I actually considered that moving from first draft to second draft, because as I was typing it up, there would be moments where I'd think, okay, this wording isn't that great. I need comma here, punctuation. And so I would do some light editing and revising when I moved it from handwritten to typed.
Okay, so when you say typed, I assume were you using Word or did you use a different program?
Yes, I was using Word. I've considered using some of the book writing software, and I may again for the book that isn't published, which I didn't think I was going to start talking about it so much, but here I'm bringing it up again. That one, because there's so many chapters and it is so long, would probably do better in a one of those types of software where you can physically move around a chapter by grabbing the whole thing. Whereas this book, it felt manageable enough to do it in one Word document. Although I believe when I first started typing it up, I would put each chapter in a separate document. And then when I felt that it was revised enough to my satisfaction, I started adding it all together in one document. And because I was nervous about the technology, I saved it in multiple places because I thought, well, I don't know, what if my hard drive breaks? And so I had it in a Google Drive. I think I emailed it to myself every few weeks, maybe once a week or every other week, and I had it saved on my computer. Yeah, so I think I had it in 3 places where I could periodically go and get a copy of it if I needed to.
Now, when you started to put those ideas together and you put them in Word, take me through, at that point, did you get help with editing and formatting, or did you start going into the publication process right after that?
Good question. So I actually got help, but not with editing yet. I started working with a coach because I stalled out. And after a few weeks, maybe even a month, I realized I'm dragging my feet. The book is essentially done. For a little while, it was all about what's the subtitle going to be. And then because I know myself, some of the time I get hung up on details that maybe don't matter as a way of not moving forward, procrastinating essentially. And so I started thinking, there's something emotionally in me that's scared about this next step, even though it is something I was very excited about. So I got one coaching session that was just a one-off from a woman, and that was really helpful. And then a few months later, so I moved forward a little bit more. And then I felt I was getting another block, and I worked with another coach for probably about a month, and we'd meet once a week. And she also was my accountability buddy for a period of time. And then I said, hey, can I hire you so I can just dive in and have it be all about me, not us both being accountable to one another. She was also working on a book. And so for a period of time, it was perfect that we were both checking in. And I don't know if all writers experience this, but I know many writers and many artists, as much as we're excited to get the work out there, there's also the question of what are people going to think? What if they don't like it? How will I handle rejection? How will I handle all the emotional ups and downs? And so I wanted to work through that with my coach because being going through the process of self-publishing, I was the only one driving everything forward. And if I wasn't driving it forward, there were no publishers or editors saying, hey, where's the next version? Or have you done this next step yet? It was all me having to make myself move forward. And so an accountability buddy who then turned into a coach. I also took an online class with a coach that I've done a few programs with, and it was all about taking blog posts, turning it into book form. And that's not what I did, but his course was about self-publishing nonfiction. And so going to the weekly calls and hearing what everyone else was going through, that also helped me to keep moving forward, because it can be somewhat of a lonely pursuit. And even though I consider myself highly self-motivated, you're sustaining self-motivation for many months or years, depending on what type of book publishing process you're in. And keeping that going, I find with either having a person to connect to or a group, that helps me to pick back up again when something slows me down.
So when you got done with the master document itself,
Mm-hmm.
did you then take it to an editor at somebody
Yes.
completely different? Was that was also a paid position or somebody that was
Yes.
good?
Yes. So I don't remember exactly now where I found her, but it was on one of the sites where you can hire people for contract work. So either Upworks or
Okay.
Fiverr or something like that. First, I sent her a selection of 1,000 words and paid her to edit that. And because I wanted to see what her level of work was. But I should mention, because I almost forgot this, before I did that, one of the things in the book course that I took that he recommended that we do, partially to save money and partially maybe just as a fun thing to do, was he said, reach out, if you want, reach out to people ask will different friends, do a first edit of the book. And so, as I said, my book is fairly short, 60,000, or I don't remember how many thousand words, but it's 68 pages. So I divided it, I believe, into 3 chunks, and I probably emailed 15 or so people who I chose, not just because I thought maybe they'll read 10,000 words for me, but also they were the type of people who I either thought, this is my ideal reader and I really want to hear their perspective. And some of them, they all had different types of perspectives. So, and I'll get into my book a little bit later, but it's a spiritual nonfiction book and it's about trees. So I connected with biologists that I know because they have that tree knowledge and they look at the world from the scientific point of view. And then I contacted people I know who are into sound healing and spiritual things because I thought, well, they're coming from that point of view as well. And so in the end, I probably had about 10 or so people who said yes. And I, through Google Drive, sent them, I think each group got somewhere between 10 and 20,000 words. Again, I don't remember because it's been a little while. And I also gave them a deadline and said, look, this is my timeline for the book. You have 2 or 3 weeks to go in, make your comments. You can comment or edit or revise to your heart's content. If you want to be a proofreader, great. If you want to read the whole thing and give me your response at the end of it, great. One of the people, he almost line edited it for me. Every paragraph there was a comment. I didn't use all his comments and ideas, but it was really great. And so I used all of those to get the book to the best state that I could. It also, I did 2 rounds of this. The first round of it made me realize that an aspect of the book that I had been thinking about, that I should include it. And so then I ended up adding, every chapter ends with a practical application for working with the theme of that chapter. And that was written with my point of view. And so it didn't have that at first. And so with working through, a few of the readers recommended something of that nature, and I thought, let me just put it in every chapter. And so after I had taken all of the feedback and done my improvements, then I went to that editor. As I said, I hired her to do 1,000 words. I was happy with what she did with that, and then asked her, would she be open to editing the rest of the book? And I think she only edited it one time, or maybe she edited it and then I worked with it, and I might have sent her a few passages to look at again after I was done, or just to get reflection after that.
Okay. And we'll get, so from there, once the editing is done, then obviously, and sometimes this is a function of editing, it had to be formatted. So let me just,
Mm-hmm.
I'll get a couple of data points from you, and then we'll go into the content of the book. What
Yeah.
are the dimensions, the physical dimensions of the book? I mean, I know the thickness might be tough, but do you
Right.
know, is it like a 5.5 by 8.5?
I believe it's a 6 point something by 9.
6 by 9, which
And
is very, yeah, that's a very popular size.
yes, and I don't 100% remember the thickness of it, but it's too narrow for them to print
That's
a
right.
title on the spine.
So
If I would have known that, I may have added 10 more pages in just so I could get the title, because I didn't know that at the time.
I think it's
I
70. Well, it depends on, again, whether it's 6 by 9 or 5.5 by 8. But I think Amazon KDP, I think at some point they told me it had to be 70 pages. And when they said
Mm-hmm.
70 pages, they meant 70 pieces of paper, which would be 140. So
Yes.
that was really confusing. So it sounds like it's 6 by 9. Now, did you do it as an ebook? And obviously you've got a print book in your hand, but
Yes.
did it start off as an ebook and a print book, or just straight to print?
I did both straight from the beginning, partly because I do read some ebooks, but not a lot. I'm fairly selective. And I knew the way this book is, the way I pictured it being used, it's not exactly a coffee table book, but it's like that, in that I picture it's a book you keep on your nightstand or on your coffee table, that you pick up and read a few pages and set back down again. And because of that, and the reading habits that I anticipated, I wanted as many people as possible to be able to do that with it. Whereas the books that any book that I use in the way I just described, I have a physical copy of it. I don't have any ebooks where I pull it up out of Libby or on whatever, my Kindle account, and then read a little bit and then put it down. The books I read electronically, I'm reading it start to finish, and that's how I do it. And so some of it was, I knew I wanted people to have that hard copy, and that was a priority for me. And the ebook was a bonus. And I also, not everyone does this, but a lot of people will price the ebook lower than the print copy. And I did, because I thought, well, I like there to be different options for, if you're not sure if you want to get this and you don't want to spend a lot of money, we'll buy the ebook. And some people have told me they've bought both, which is cool. Not many, but a handful.
And there's a big commission difference between the two. Now, if we're just talking
Mm-hmm.
about the Amazon's KDP ecosystem, which I've
Mm-hmm.
said KDP on several episodes, that I couldn't remember what it stood for, but now I looked it up again yesterday. It's Kindle Digital Publishing is what KDP stands for. Now, did you get your own ISBN, or was yours created entirely in the Amazon KDP ecosystem
I think it was within theirs.
within theirs?
And I, my impression was, for this book, some of the choices I made were, let me get the book out.
Now, let's get into the actual. Let's start, if you don't mind, if you've got a good passage, let's just go right into that. Just read some of
Yes.
it, and then we'll talk about where that came from.
Yes. And before I do, I want to say two quick things. I had essentially a list of what are the things that are, it has to be in the book, and this has to be to my level of perfect no matter what. And then there were a lot of other things that ended up being on the list that was, does it really matter? Get it done and get it out there. And I had a few people who they would advise me their opinions of what had to be done for the book. And similarly, I had to weigh whose opinions I used and whose opinions about what aspect. Because one person, they wanted me, I forget exactly what it was, but if I would have followed their idea, it would have taken at least 6 more months to get the book out. And other elements to it, and it might have been a more polished version. I think they wanted me to go for hardcover, and they said, oh, this is like a book of poetry and it'll have higher acclaim. And I thought, they're not wrong. However, my goals are different, and I feel that I need to get this book out sooner rather than later.
From
And
conception to publication, how long did that take from beginning to end? Total
good
timeline.
question. So it was less than 9 months, definitely. I believe it was September to March. So what is that? Okay, so 7 months. So the book is channeled from the trees. And what that means is I went into a meditation and I essentially asked the trees, what do you want me to say for you? What do you want me to write about? And then I would wait till I got the answer, and then I would write. And as I said, I did this by hand. And it was, most of it felt like it was very general. There were a few chapters that felt really personal to me because I will go talk to the trees, not usually out loud, but when I'm in challenging moments, I sit with the trees and I ponder my problems, pray for an answer. I don't always ask the trees for an answer, but I'm usually sitting with them and looking at them. And so one of my reviewers told me about one of the chapters. She said, this one seems really, it doesn't fit with the rest of the theme of the book. And I realized after I got her feedback, that chapter spoke to me personally, but it had a different mood and tone than the rest of the book. And so I took it out and thought, I can publish this as an article. I can publish it, submit it to a journal if I want. And one of the reasons I'm sharing this is it can be challenging when you're publishing your own work, a chapter you feel really connected to, or a character or whatnot. If your readers are giving you good feedback, you have to have that level of objectivity and say, okay, what is the point of this work? And when I thought, what is the point of this work? Do I want one chapter out of 12 that kind of rings a different feeling, tone, mood? And I thought, no, I don't. So I took that one out.
I think you've got some good information selected for us there. What chapter are you got?
Thank you. So this is chapter 7. So chapter 7 is called Inner Hollows and Outer Pain. Sometimes life's sorrows carve out so deeply, you feel that your insides will never stop aching again. You curl yourself around the ache and wish for it to disappear. As a tree, the empty hollows are painful at first. Whatever causes the wound in the trunk or heartwood, I respond. First, sap comes to seal the place from further harm. Then my sap, like your tears, dries. Time passes, squirrels, beetles, and woodpeckers move in. The hollow supports moss, mushrooms, and microorganisms. My wounds are a part of me, but their space becomes a place where others exist too. Without that space, there's no room for the others to live. Every pain, every wound brings you closer to others. Not right away, of course. The wound needs to breathe, to be covered with sap, and to seal. But once sealed, that space allows space for others to move in. And I'm going to stop there because even though I could keep on going, it's nice to have a taste, but not feel like, okay, we're full now.
And how many meditations do you think it took to, I guess at some point, I guess this is a difficult question to ask because
Mm,
there's the instinctual part that you got
mm-hmm.
through meditation. So in other words, there
Mm-hmm.
was the part that was kind of what I would say brought down. I mean, the
Yes.
word channel is good too, but I love to say
Mm-hmm.
brought down because you're bringing it
Yes.
from the outside down into you. So there's that part of it. And then of course there's the left brain intellectual editor,
Mm-hmm.
and I talk a little bit about that in what I wrote, that when the editor takes over and when to sometimes you have to tame the editor, and sometimes you have to let the muse speak, and then sometimes you have to let the editor speak, and
Yes,
the editor can really ruin the creative flow. So
that's true.
for most people, the creative flow is harder. So when the muse speaks, you have to make sure the editor doesn't come into the room because that's two different
Mm-hmm.
parts of the brain, two different processes. So how many meditations do you think it took, or hours of contemplation, to get the
Mm,
source material? And then how
right.
much of your time was spent in the editor part of the brain? So let's just say, if
Right.
we don't have to come up with a number of hours, but let's just say expressed as a percentage.
Right,
What
right. Great question. And I used to be an English teacher, and so I love that you highlight this. And from my knowledge of teaching writing, I've gotten very good at having the discipline of when the muse is happening, I don't work. It's hard for me not to worry if a word is spelled incorrectly, but I keep on going and I just let it flow. And for me, sometimes handwriting is better, sometimes computer writing and typing is better. So I'm really glad you brought that up. I was very disciplined that if I'm writing it, there's no editing while the muse is speaking. There are 12 chapters. And so I would say I probably did somewhere around 15 meditations, maybe a few more, like maybe as many as 20, because as I said, there were some parts that didn't go in the book. There were a few chapters. It wasn't just one meditation to do it all. And that, though, when I'm in the zone, as I call it, whether it was writing this book or any other book, well, one, I lose track of time, like many people who are in the zone, and it happens very fast. There's just the flow. And so in terms of hours, I don't even know if I would say it took 30 minutes of those 15 times total. Like probably that's a rough estimate. 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, not usually an hour, but maybe sometimes. And whereas the editing, to me, that's a slower pace, and it doesn't flow in the same way because you're using your logical mind and it's more precise and plodding along in a way. It might have been double the working on the piece time versus the writing of it. So I could estimate that. And I'm also, then there's the administrative part, putting it in the Google Drive, backing up the copies, emailing the people who maybe wanted to write, finding an editor. So all of that, I don't truly count as writing time, but it's something. It's working on this whole piece. So we could call that administrative time. That was probably equal almost to the writing of the book, maybe a little bit less. Because I would also put up a Facebook post and say, what do you think about this? I designed the cover myself. I hired multiple people to do it and then didn't like how any of them turned out, and then went back to my version and tweaked it and got feedback. So yes, I would include in the whole administrative, sharing it with other people, getting their feedback, reflecting on it. Coaching hours and class time was probably somewhere between around 15 to 20 hours over the course of that time period.
You've got your ebook, you've got your print book. Did you do an
Mm-hmm.
audible version as well?
I am partway through that. So
Okay.
again, with the whole, I'm my own publisher, so I'm the one making things happen. I have recorded, I think, a third of it, and it's on my to-do list. It's supposed to be happening every week. I record a chapter, but that got slowed down recently. And but it's on my calendar for this week. So I'm partway through that. And that, similar to once my book was finished, I don't have any desire to learn what happens from taking an MP4 file to being a finished book. So I will be paying someone. I may know how to splice them together,
Sure.
but I'm sure there's like chapter breaks or certain things
Yes,
that
yes,
I don't know how to do.
has to be ACX compliant, right? I've learned a little bit
Okay.
of, but and the only reason why I know that is I'm in some Facebook groups that talk about ACX, and I may or may not um, have that done by somebody else. I'll have to
Mm-hmm.
look to see. And for me, the most exciting part wasn't necessarily the writing was the second best part. But the thing I'm
Mm-hmm.
most excited about is doing the audiobook. So I did all of this
Mm.
other stuff to get to the audiobook. So I'm a fanatical consumer of audiobooks. I mean, I've been with Audible. I think I first had a membership in 1998, back when
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
and I've burned through. I'm surprised. It's unreal. I think I'm on my third account because, I've changed devices and emails and
Uh-huh.
phone numbers and stuff like that. But Audible has just been fantastic. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, they got acquired by Amazon
Mm.
so many years ago. But one
Mm-hmm.
thing I will say, and I know Amazon gets beat up a lot, and some of it is deserved, but
Mm-hmm.
from my own personal experience, even though my book has not made it all the way through the KDP process yet, because I realized there were some formatting errors that weren't immediately visible until I went through
Mm-hmm.
Amazon's. But I'll tell you, if you have a manuscript in Word and it's formatted correctly, your book could be out there in 3 days. I was
I
shocked
know.
how few steps it was. So, for anybody out there wanting to write a book, thinking about writing one, once it's formatted right, and maybe get help with that, it's 3 days. They do a 3-day review process, and you can have a print book on demand (POD). You can have an ebook. Obviously, the audiobook you'd have to do the narration, but
Mm-hmm.
they review it for 72 hours, and it's on Amazon for sale. Now, the last piece of the puzzle is, you've got the creative part that's difficult. You've got the editing part that's difficult. You've got formatting and publication, and some people that make it all the way through that. Self-publishing, the biggest challenge seems to me is the marketing and promotion,
Mm-hmm.
because you either
Right,
already
right.
have to be famous, or you have to have a
Mm-hmm.
big network, or you have to have a big ad spend. So
Mm-hmm.
out of your efforts to promote your book, what
Mm-hmm.
what pathways are you seeing that has bore the most fruit?
Yeah, great question. So initially, I do have an email list and it's not massive, but I have been emailing them. If they've been with me for a while, it's going on 6 years every week. So I'm very consistent and I have good open rate around 40%. To me, that feels good. It's an open rate. I'm assuming people know what open rate is, but that's the percentage of people who open your email. So
And
as I
40
said,
and 40% is ridiculously high for those people that don't know. That's outrageously high.
yes,
Now let's back up just a little bit. How did you get
yes.
those emails? How did that get built?
Good question. So I would present workshops and ask people, do they want to sign up for my email list? Periodically, I'll post about it on social media. And I have done a few guest articles for blogs or other media sites. So that was where I got the first bulk of people. For the past number of years, I haven't done as many guest articles, but I do like to go on podcasts. Typically, I find for me, when I offer a workshop, that's when I get the most signups. And that's either a free workshop or a paid workshop. Now, that being said, as much as I love all of that, over the next 6 months, there's two things that I know I'm going to be focusing on. One is growing my email list more. And the second one, I haven't done Amazon ads for my book yet. So that's something that I will be looking into, that I'm excited to do. And I say excited, who knows how I'll feel once I do it, but it's a new thing that I haven't done before. So I do have an excitement level about it, because the people who found the ads that work for them, it sounds that they get great results from it. And that to me sounds really positive.
Is the ad spend for your book, again, in a business context, it makes a lot more sense because, again, they're not just trying to sell books, they're trying to do other things. So you spending that money on ads to sell your book, is there also a second or third stream of revenue involved in that that you might potentially get a lift out of from the book sale?
That is what I'm anticipating. That's what I do plan for. And I will say at this point, my book, there are some bonuses that people can get, but I don't have it set up where it's a funnel where after you get the bonuses, then next week or tomorrow night, you get an email. Hey, here's my thing.
In your book, does it talk about go to this website, or are they directed in anywhere outside of that book to try to connect with you?
Yes, there are a few times, I think two times in the book, where people are directed to connect with me. And then I have my website on the back of my book. I just wanted to double check that. And this is one of the things that I love about Amazon. So when earlier this year, I changed my web page, and I had been planning to change it, but I didn't think about that when I published the book, and it had my old web page. So yes, there is a redirect, but I updated my copy of the book and uploaded it. And within 3 days, it was the copy that had the correct web link for people to go to. I also have two times redone the back cover, and anticipate I may have a professional take what I have done, polish it up, and rework the whole cover. Although it's funny, because even though a book cover does matter, I think in a bookstore it's different than on Amazon. For example, I worked with a few people on, I forget what it's called, but the description of your book on the Amazon page.
Mhm.
I've worked with a few people for that. And every few months, I think, is it time to work with somebody
That's
else?
right. There's a
Because,
description
yeah,
keywords.
it
There's
makes a big
a
difference.
big difference.
Yes.
Just like on this YouTube video, there's going to be hashtags. There's going to be, I'll put your link on there, which helps, to some limited degree. It
Mm-hmm.
helps your SEO for when I put your
Mm-hmm.
website into the description, because as you know, anytime your website is referenced somewhere not on your website,
Mm-hmm.
that raises your, the prominence of your page. So the more
Exactly.
podcasts you can get on, the more different websites, blogs where you can get exposure. Even some people say get on, depending on what your niche is, to get on Quora and answer
Mm-hmm.
questions and brand yourself on there, because you can,
Mm-hmm.
when you're writing to people and helping people, which is a great way to help people, you're putting your signature block in there, and you can drop your website in there too. You can't go crazy with self promotion, but every time you put your website in there, that could potentially strengthen your SEO as well.
Yes. And another thing, so when I was talking about events, one of the other places I've done well with book sales. So as I said, my book is a spiritual book. It's also very nature-based. So there's a place near me called Treehouse Cafe, and my book is about trees, and they have a gift shop area. They sell a lot of copies of my book. There's another shop that's a spiritual and eco-friendly shop that sells copies of my books. And this is also on my to-do list, because the book is one part of my business, but it's not the only part. And so sometimes I'll spend a lot of time where I really focus on recording the audio, promoting it, pitching events, and then I focus on other things, and it takes a back burner. And I still also notice in those times sales go down, and then other times they go up again. But one of my to-dos for the next 6 months is I have a whole list of other bookstores that are metaphysical bookstores and maybe yoga studios that also have a gift shop, reaching out to places like that because it's a book that when people pick it up and look at it, I think it's very easy to get a sense of it there, and people tend to like to buy it in that way. And I agree with you 100% about it being this business card that opens doors. I have definitely used it on occasion to, I mean, when I go to author signing, I give the author my book and I say, I'm a love that you wrote a book. I'm so excited to read it. I'm an author too. Here's my book. This is my way of saying thank you for the work that you've done, and here's my book. And so I just started doing that because I thought it was fun. And I also see that we are peers, even though typically they're very famous and I'm someone they've never heard of, but that's okay. It doesn't, I don't mind. I like it being a way to connect with other people and have a talking point that we both have to work from if we want to. And as I said, will that open doors? Well, you don't always know what doors are opened at that moment. And one of the things that I love about a book is, well, there's so many things that I love about books. But in addition to whatever business aspects, it's when I have people who reach out to me and say, "Oh, I read this with my child," or "I read this with so and so, and here's the experience that I have." So the book is out there creating these ripples of impact and doing things differently for people that most of those things we're never going to know about. And even if you don't reach bestseller status, it's still great if you're a person who wants to be making an impact to be noticing the ways in which it is impacting your life. And the other thing I want to say about this is I think that I had a hope that the book would take a life of its own really quickly. And I just thought, oh, I'm just going to be one of those people that it just gets all this momentum and it goes and goes. And it that didn't happen for one. But what it also made me realize is, and some is from book marketing classes that I've taken and just reading of what so many authors have said about marketing and promoting their book, even the ones who we may perceive that their book took off, they're still working really hard,
That's
or
right.
they have a whole publishing company working really hard to get that book featured in the window, featured on the podcast, featured on TV. There's it seems like there are so few true overnight successes. I don't even know what the percentage is, but it's less than 1%. And it's okay if you still have a secret hope that you'll be the one, because maybe you will be the one. But even if you're not, what I found is giving yourself the opportunity to say, well, what else can I do if I put a little bit more into this, and see about that? Because I've also known some people who they published their book and it had this ripple effect for 3 months or so, and then it's just a book on the shelf, and that's fine. And I started to let my book do the same thing, and several months after it came out, I thought, well, let me put in a little bit more effort periodically and see, can this still have an effect going out?
And it's like a movie, right? I mean, there are books that are timeless, but
Right.
and not that a book necessarily has an expiration date, but the momentum usually has an expiration date. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody big picked up your book, I'm afraid to throw names out nowadays because I don't know who's been canceled or not. But
Right. Who will stay big?
just imagine a person that you like that's big holding up your book, and that
Mm-hmm.
would give you this tremendous amount of lift. Now, I know you have an audio book to do, so I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
interrupt your flow, but I will ask you, what's the one thing keeping you from getting book number 2 out there? If you had a magic wand and you
Oh.
could make one of the roadblocks disappear,
Mm.
what would it be?
So book number 2, I'm going back to fiction. So my first book that I did not publish was fiction, and this one is nonfiction. And the idea that I got for the next one is fiction. And what I have found that my roadblock has been, sometimes it's just the inertia of starting. And what often helps me, and I mentioned this before, when I'm in a group setting, whether it's a class or just a group that meets regularly, that really helps me get going. So there are, in the past 2 weeks, I've been looking into writers groups in my area.
Yeah,
I looked into it years ago. Oh,
mastermind group.
is yours a writers group?
Oh, no, but I
Oh,
just mean,
okay.
that's sometimes mastermind groups come together
Oh,
for a
yes.
single, even though we're just a basket of, entrepreneurs. But yeah,
Yes.
it doesn't have to, just only one person needs a Zoom Pro account, only one person needs a
Yes.
paid account. But that's
Exactly.
a great, a mastermind group for writers would be great for accountability. We all remember when the website Meetup was really big. People would go down to the coffee shop with other writers, and I did that for a while
Yes.
too, way before I ever had anything written of any substance.
Mm-hmm.
I was attending a meetup group in my hometown for a while, which was really interesting
Mm-hmm.
because people were reading and helping each other out, motivating, and the
Mm-hmm.
accountability, making sure people stay on task and things like that.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
relatively fast to start one. So good.
Right. I love that you brought up Mastermind. One, because hey, you're showing us all it's good to always promote yourself. And when I first started business, and this was also when I committed to writing my email list 6 or so years ago, I created a mastermind. I thought there would be a few more people in it, but it ended up just being 3 of us. We met every month for over a year. And then I moved away and we still met for about 3 more months on Zoom. And I realized in that year, that's what kept me moving forward,
Yeah. Well,
because the momentum, the week we met, it would last a little bit longer. And then the week before we met, I thought, well, I better do something because we're meeting soon
that's
and I don't
right.
want to show up empty handed.
That's right.
So,
That's right. You always that level of accountability, even in the gym,
mm-hmm,
having a gym buddy or a coach
mm-hmm,
makes what you're able to do with the assistance of another person in any endeavor is
mm-hmm.
even just putting a dinner together. If somebody could do a little bit of prep or a little, help clean as you go, something, every
Yes.
just a little bit of cooperation and collaboration makes everything move better. And with
Mm-hmm,
that, Rachel, how can people find you? How can they best connect? Do you want them going to your website? Do you want
mm-hmm.
them just going on Amazon and buying a pallet of books? What do you want them to do? Let's get some links going here.
Yes, so they can go to my website, rachelstrivelli.com. If they want to buy a pallet of books, they should email me because I can do a wholesale discount. And that was
Bulk
another
deal.
thing that I only learned a few months ago. I saw some other people who do a book is a part of their business, and they, if you buy 20 books or 100 books, you get certain things. And it's on my list to add to my website. Okay, if you buy this many books, you get a session with me, or I'll come teach a workshop to your group. Because why not? Like, there's somebody who maybe wants to do a book study group on my book or your book or the listener's book. So you can go buy one or many on Amazon if you wish. And I highly recommend it for anyone who's a nature lover, or so the subtitle is Wake Up to Wisdom, Wonder, and Calm. And I wanted to give people something that would make them feel peaceful and grounded. And as I said, the chapters are short, so you can read it in between Zoom meetings. You can read it when you have 2 minutes, maybe that have frazzled you from something that happened during the day, and you're not wanting to meditate, or you don't like meditating, or you don't have time to meditate. But this book has that calming forest feeling that gives you this momentary meditation during the day.
It's a lot like
So,
the daily meditation books that I haven't seen them as much, like a daily devotional or daily meditation,
mm-hmm,
where you can just, like you said, it's not a coffee table book. It's almost more of a nightstand book,
mm-hmm,
at the office where you can just pick
mm-hmm,
it up and yeah, I think that's fantastic. I even thought about I don't have a book like that in me necessarily, but even getting some type of application where you could convert the wisdom from your book into smaller, let's say daily quotes, and you could on
Yes.
that email list, like send a quote from the book daily, or
Mm-hmm.
a completely separate project where somebody is on some type of subscription service that's getting that daily
Yes.
little piece of knowledge. So
So one of the things that I'm going to do is create a workbook based on my book. And you've probably seen other nonfiction books where they have so much content in them, but you finish the book and you think, now what do I do? Whereas if you have a workbook and there's a few pages with sections to fill in or draw something, or it breaks it down into a workbook that you can actively engage with, that I think is really, it's fun and it lets you apply the knowledge in
and
a
we
new way.
and we didn't get into this as much, but I do want to mention that obviously when they go to your website, you're more than just an author. There's other services
Mm-hmm.
that you provide, and you did talk about some of the workshops, but you didn't talk about some of the transformative work that you do. Can you give us a synopsis of
Yes.
some of that work that you do?
Right. Oh, thank you so much. So I work with people one-to-one and then sometimes also in small groups. And starting this year, also leading some retreats. I really am focused on how can you grow in the way that's most natural and authentic to you. And so I am an intuitive and I value people being true to themselves. And it's like if a coach and a psychic melded together and mashed up into one person who is really focused on how can we look at whatever's blocking you, whatever you're focused on, and find the most gentle, compassionate, and effective way to move forward.
Who's your ideal client?
My ideal client. The funnest people who I love working with so much are they are into personal development or spirituality themselves. And we come together and half the time we're giggling because I don't have to say much. And they're like, oh, I get where you're going with this. And it's somebody who they are either visionary or a trailblazer and they are venturing into something that feels the unknown. And I'm the person who not only is a guide, but I'm explaining this unknown trailblazing thing to them with them as they're doing it. And even though it's so novel for them, I mean, it's novel to me too, because I'm just figuring it out as we're working together. It's it's a lot of fun. And so people who are wanting to have some fun within this growth and people who are loving valuing curiosity and expanding past what you know, they always have fun working with me.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate you. I'm glad we were finally able to have an episode together.
Me too.
Thank you so much for coming on, Rachel. Have a great day. Our second guest on the Free Time Mastermind podcast is author Luv Lubker, and we'll discuss her book Under His Spell, which is a work of historical fiction describing a love story between Princess Royal Victoria and Fritz Wilhelm Frederick III of Prussia. We'll also be giving away a signed hardback copy of her book. Stay with us to the end for more details. Obviously, you're a published author, and I'd like to start off with the genre that you write in, which would be accurately described as historical fiction. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about Historium Press.
Historium Press is small hybrid publisher. They do some other publishing also now, but they just started a couple years ago as the publishing part, and I found them through newsletter from one of the writing conferences I've been on. Yeah.
And how far were you into your writing by the time that you reached out?
I was nearly finished with my fifth book when I found the publisher.
And how early did you start as a writer? When did that begin for you?
I started writing just 3.5 years ago.
And what influenced you to do that, to get started with that?
I had researched the Victorian era for a long time. I started with Jane Eyre, the Bronte sisters, back when I was 15, where my mom sprained her ankles and was laid up and was reading a lot, and she was alternating. She and my dad had watched a Jane Eyre movie, and she read the book and alternating reading that to when he was there and reading something else to me and my brother. But I got into that then. Got into the realms after that through common events and places, and everybody had always said I should write a book when I was doing the Bronte research, and I always said I didn't describe things. And then I always liked to get into the research that's like less easy to prove or less easy to get published. So I felt like it wasn't something I could do a nonfiction book about, but writing it as a novel, I can tell the story I want to tell.
And that's good. And you had a wellspring of information using real historical events, and you could, almost like a jazz musician, you could riff off of that existing material. And I would assume that you probably have several more books in you based on these stories, and to give the audience a basis for the family that you're focusing on. Can you tell us historically a little bit about the characters that you've focused most attention on?
The Ravencourts is my series name, but I'm starting with Queen Victoria's oldest daughter, Vicky, who became the German Empress and is the mother of Kaiser Wilhelm of World War I. But I'm bringing out different sides of it than most people do. I'm not making Bismarck, who's usually the big figure in that story, a major character. I'm bringing out somebody who's not usually talked about, who's actually in the royal family. Fritz, Vicky's husband's uncle, Charles or Carl. Yeah, I tell my story from multiple points of view. Vicky always anglicized everything, and the other characters are mostly German, so.
And you spent some time learning German as well, which I think was quite impressive. So you have this more immersive and perhaps closer understanding to the source material, because you're reading some of the real, I assume, diaries and information that we have on that family in the native German.
Yeah, Fritz's diary, Friedrich III, Vicky's husband. I translated a lot of his diary.
And where do you find that type of information? Are you getting a hold of the books? Is this digital media?
Yeah, there's some books published, some I get directly from the archives that aren't published yet. So some it's ebooks that I can copy and paste from, and some that I actually did transcribe by hand and didn't scan it and put it in OCR because I wanted to learn to type in the language.
And of course, in this age of ebooks and audiobooks, which we'll get into in a moment as far as the audiobooks, but you actually have a physical printed book and in hardback there. You've got a great example of it. And I noticed online you're also selling autographed copies, which I think is a great way to get some get some physical book sales out there too.
Yeah, I've got 2 books actually. But yeah, book 1 is under his spell.
And so was the motivation to write the book, did it start when someone said, you're doing all this research, you should write a book? Or did you kind of develop that idea on your own?
There were various pieces of the research I'd just gotten to within a few months of when I started, so I wouldn't have been ready to start earlier. And like part of the bad guy stuff about him, what was new information, but it was like one of the hardest things. I usually write the hardest parts first to beat the book, so get that part over and then the rest is easy.
And we talked a little bit before in our pre-show about the cover design. Can you tell me about how you came up with that?
I had done a different cover design originally, and but I had the pink and purple and gold as my color scheme, but this was what my publisher did, so came up with.
So when you were almost finished with this first book, you reached out to Historian Press, and what was that process to get on board with them?
I said I had gone to online writing conference, historical conference, and was in the newsletter that they were promoting. Historian Press was taking submissions. I had submitted to one other publisher that was one that did historical fiction, but with sources and stuff included, that was called like history through fiction or something. But it was like I found them an hour before their submission time was closing for a few months, so I didn't really get in. And then a couple months later that I found Historian Press and did I hadn't done a longer synopsis, which they wanted, or a query letter. The query letter's like the only thing I've really used AI to do, just to give me a framework to use.
And if you've got a passage picked out from the book there, or if you want to take some time and maybe do that later, if you want to get a little closer to the mic and read a few paragraphs of the book.
Fritz gazed about him as he drove through London with his parents and little sister, Vivi. Looking ahead, he saw several large buildings. That must be Buckingham Palace, he thought. The palace had a huge square facade, like most of the town palaces he was used to. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert greeted them at the top of the staircase. "Come to the Chinese drawing room," the Queen said in German, leading the way. Fritz lingered behind, not knowing where he fit in. A little girl stood at the door, in a white dress with red bows, her long hair bound up in a net. She came forward and held out her hand to be kissed. Behind her were the other younger children. "Vicky, Bertie, Alice, all of you. This is Prince Fritz of Prussia, and his sister Louise, or Vivi as she prefers to be called," the Queen said. "They're your guests. Vicky is to be hostess. You are to show him and his sister Vivi about the exhibition when we go. Stay with Miss Hildyard and the guard on duty. Don't get lost in the crowd. Make sure to speak in German so that Fritz and Vivi can understand everything. But you can go about together. When we do not go out, you can play together." "But we don't know how to play," said Vivi quietly.
Fantastic. Tell me what the secret is about how you paint a picture through that descriptive language. So I write nonfiction, so most of my stuff is nuts and bolts. I don't say long hair and colors, and you're really painting a picture and putting someone there. What's the secret to adding the sights and smells and colors into a scene?
I said one of the things I always said was I don't describe things, and I always felt like I didn't really know how to do that. And with the second book, it has a lot of travel and other parts that I had to learn how to do more descriptive writing. But when I always feel like it doesn't have that much description, but and in reviews that everybody praises the description, so it's just.
And did you design these two covers yourself? And if so, what program did you use?
It was the publisher's design. I had done a different design myself and kept the same basic color scheme, the pink and purple and gold. That is my.
And that'll continue throughout the series. So you've got 2 books there. And how many more do you think you have planned for the future as far as the Rival Court series is concerned?
I've already written most of 3 more, and they're longer ones.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And I'm planning 6 books, but I've started on the 6th one, but I've been doing more research again the last year.
I think there's a great story there too, because there was some crowdfunding. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that was for the purpose of bringing the team together to do the audio, or was that for a different aspect of the publication?
It was getting the audio done, yeah.
And of course, that to pull an audiobook together, a lot of audiobooks are just single narrator, but you had a cast, which when I found that out and I looked it up on Audible, it was shocking to me because, that's like putting on a play. That's a gigantic project, like when you say you write a book in 4 months, that blows me away because, I have a book that's not out yet and it's half the size of your first one. And it took me, working a couple hours a day for 6 months to produce a much smaller book. So you move really fast. And plus you were able to pull together this team to do the audio. And I think that's incredible. So can you give us some background on how you were able to get the logistics together, to get a whole team to do narration?
I actually worked with people on Fiverr and had it all recorded separately and then had a person to put it all together.
And Fiverr is fantastic. I've only used Fiverr, I think, a few times. I'm on Upwork quite a bit. That's where I got the editor for my book was from Upwork. My video editor for this podcast series, Javon, he's an Upworker, great guy. He's really been a fantastic find and a great help. So you had to go through for each character, each narrator, you had to audition these people basically and make sure they were right for the part. That had to be quite a process for you.
Yeah, Fiverr has where they had samples and stuff, so I was able to find people that fit the voices in my head. So
Because it was a dramatic reading, right? Almost like a stage
yeah.
play.
And
How many voice actors are on that under his book?
6 or 7. Yes, 7. 6 men and 1 woman.
And then you said at the very end you had to then hire someone to put it together because Audible, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they use a format called ACX. So your book has to be in this, and I don't know much about it. I just know your book has to be in ACX format, whatever that is, to get published. So you had to hire somebody specifically just to do that as well.
Yeah, it had it where ACX has a thing where you can put your book up for people to audition, or you can upload an audiobook that's already done. So I got it all done and then uploaded because I didn't know if they do multiple narrators or not.
Do you think there was a cost savings there to doing it through Fiverr versus using ACX talent?
I don't know. They have multiple options where you can split royalty with the narrator, or where you pay a certain amount and then you get the royalties, which is the same as what I did on Fiverr, but have more books, so it won't be ongoing for them too.
Sounds like you have potentially years of material that you can continue writing on this series. So
Yeah.
a total of 6 books. So 4 more And do you have a schedule where you're going to publish them every 2 years, one a year, twice a year? What's your
I've
thoughts?
done these two a year apart, and I've already got the next one ready, and a couple more that are mostly done. So probably one a year.
One a year, okay. And did you get, because obviously I had to have someone edit and format my book so that it would be accepted through the KDP process. Did you have somebody come in for the written portion and edit it and format it?
I did a lot of it. I actually paid my brother to proofread it. And when my publisher has the team, but they said it was already pretty well edited. So
Good, good. Now, on the second book, what are your plans as far as audio for that? Is that another project in the future to turn that to an
I'm
audiobook?
planning to start on it in a few months.
Are you seeing a difference in the interest of the physical book versus the audiobook version, whether people have more of an appetite for one format over another?
I haven't had a whole lot of sales on audio yet, but it's just like I'm not really sure where to market it. A lot of the places circles I'm in where I do the marketing are more readers than listeners, so haven't really gotten to do that much.
And of course, you're out there promoting yourself on various forums. That's how I found you. I actually had posted about wanting to talk to some writers, and then we started communication at that point. So that's good. I mean, you're doing a lot of your own promotion. Does the publisher have some promotion that they're responsible for as well?
Yes.
Do you know? Do they just publish in trade magazines? Do you know what their strategy is?
I do various social media and other to get it into some other things. I'm not really sure.
So can you give us any details on book 3? What's coming out next?
This is a series that follows the family, so it's like the older generation. It's like Queen Victoria and her children, but on the Prussian German side, Fritz's family is in between. He's like in between generation of the Queen's family and then his father's, and his father and his siblings. The one brother is the villain in my story. Is like the previous age generation to the Queen, so bigger gap. And then it does follow Vicky and Fritz's children as they grow up. So book 3 is where I really start to have the children be more major characters. And
Is it getting easier as you go? So is book 3 easier than 2 and 2 was easier than 1?
book 3 had a lot of hard parts. Book 4 and 5 are really the ones that I can just get lost in when I read and not critical, but I don't know.
And with that many books, I mean, there might even be, sometimes books become scripts and become movies. Have you given any thought about that?
Not really.
That would be interesting, right? If Warner Brothers or somebody approaches you and they want to turn that into a screenplay, and could be a 3-part movie, really. And there's a lot of books that have done that. I mean, obviously, or even a TV series. So Game of Thrones, obviously, I think the original book was The Tale of Ice and Fire, and then that was obviously that legacy is still going on. The Hobbit, the 3 books there. Yeah, who knows where those books could lead? But with 6 books, I mean, that's an incredible amount of material. So you're obviously very busy with that. And I know this seems a little far ahead, but do you already have plans past the 6 books, a different subject, a different family?
I'm doing like the German Prussian family in this one, and I do have ideas of doing England and Russia but in the same, my interpretation of the history is different. I bring out different people as the main characters, different side of it.
And do you know the release date for the third book?
Probably April or May next year.
That's good. That's good. And that'll give you an opportunity to promote, continue to promote number 1 and number 2.
Yeah.
And can you give us some of the links where people can find your books?
Yeah, they're on Amazon, and my Facebook page is The Rifle Courts.
And we'll have the
I do have a website, but it's mostly just a link to Amazon, so theriflecourts.com.
Find you on Facebook, Amazon, and of course Audible, which is part of Amazon. And if you want, we can take a look at the 2 covers there on the close-up if you want to see that. Yeah, there we go. Fantastic. Yeah, I love the color scheme, and I noticed that the blues and the pinks are inverted on the 2 books. So that's
yeah, under a cloud with the dark cloud part at the top was the idea of that one.
That's very good design. Very, very professional. All right. Well, we'll just look out for your books and look out for this third one, and enjoy the next audiobook when the second book goes to audio. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me. As promised, we're going to give away 1 hardback copy signed by the author of Under His Spell. The first person to write Free Time Mastermind in the comment section of the YouTube video will get a free signed copy of the book. Thank you for joining us on the Free Time Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Robert Gaines, and we appreciate you stopping in and checking out the channel. If you would, please click like, subscribe, hit the notification button, leave a comment, share the video with someone. We've got some fantastic episodes coming up. Also, too, for today's guest, check out the description to find out more about them, and also look at the links that we've posted below that for ways to get connected with us. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.